Why are you guys laughing? Is someone here?
Amy,
Are we
because
surrounded by babies?
Amy's surrounded. Yeah, I think so. I'm
My
not sure,
assistant
but
is 3 years old and very noisy. Excuse me.
All right, everybody. Thank you for coming here, either today or after our publication of this podcast. So, removing mystery from the process of research and specifically from a PhD, right? So, a lot of times, myself, you when you were little, younger, Amy now, she's little. The concept of PhD is like entering a completely new dimension. And very often, a lot of us find ourselves in exactly that situation for many reasons we will discuss today. I have prepared a PowerPoint a little bit to guide us today. So thank you everyone who is here. I'm sure we have already hundreds of people, especially from Indonesia. So we will be running these podcasts until the end of this year, every 2 weeks. And then we will go on a big holiday. And then we will see what to do next year. So today is the first of our topics in the series. And today we will be talking about introduction to the entire series. And maybe we will just broadly spill out our feelings, our emotions, our histories, our anecdotes on the concept of progress from selecting the supervisor, selecting the topic of your research. People call it topic. I just went along with it. Some of you who have worked with me know that I hate that word. That's because it doesn't actually orient you anywhere. So it's not specific. I really do not like things which are not specific because anything which is not specific is like fog. And I hate fog. You can't see a thing there. So from selecting the problem that you will be investigating, selecting your supervisor, and then all the way to publication. I will not start with publications because some people will be beating me up here. It's the hardest part probably. But okay, so maybe we could ask especially our guest, Amy, and also Lala, who completed his PhD only about 2 or 3 years ago. So all these memories are fresh. Andrew can't remember he even finished the PhD. And I just guide the conversation. So maybe we start with Amy, our guest. Amy, so you are my student. Just to disclose all kinds of relationships in the background here. So you're my students, but student, you've worked with me for the last 11 years. Mm-hmm. Not that you've been studying for 11 years, that's her.
and she's also your colleague.
And she's now my colleague. So what happened to Amy, and this is something that I would want to share, and I prefer to share it myself rather than asking Amy, because sometimes people don't give themselves justice when they talk, especially in Australia. Everybody is deprecating themselves. That's a sort of culture. So Amy was an amazing student of mine, doing coursework masters, upgrading her skills, and then she went to work. And as a result of coursework master, she's published some things with me through different initiatives. And as a school teacher, Amy continued the relationship with me and with my university. It was critical. Normally, she wouldn't get the job nowadays as a lecturer at the university. Here in Australia, you have to have a PhD. There are obviously exceptions, and these exceptions are motivated by 2 factors. Are you research active? Are you in some way exceptional in your profession? And also, are you enrolled in PhD? And Amy ticked all the boxes. She was well known also in the area. So our university is in Darwin, Northern Territory, up north in Australia. So most people knew of Amy or Amy. So yes, but it was the hard work that got her and passion. So Amy, you finally, after 10 years of after the completion of your master coursework, you've decided to enter or enroll into a PhD. How did you choose your supervisor, and how did you choose your topic?
Well,
And most importantly,
thank you,
did you write your...
for that. Thank you for that lovely introduction. That was a nice way to tell the story, obviously from your perspective as well. I feel like there was no decision-making process, because very much this work is a continuation of the work that I started 10 years ago with Anya. I remember being a master's coursework student, coming to her and saying, I'm just frustrated with this idea of play. It's vague. Everybody talks about it as though they know what they're talking about. I see it every day. I cannot articulate it. My colleagues cannot articulate it. And Anya supported me to start my research skills in that area. We went on to do lots of different projects together. I wouldn't say play's been the problem, I'd prefer to say, the whole time. But it's just interesting that now in my PhD time, we're now back at play, looking at why we do this thing called play. What is the human experience of play, and what value does it
have? For a second, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to bring a dimension to our little sharing of anecdote and stories. Amy is not in second language or TESOL, although Amy in her environment has students who don't speak English. So that's one of the characteristics of modern nations. Amy is doing research actually in the broader area of education, and specifically in early childhood, and she focuses on the concept of play.
Yes, that's true. And I would say that a lot of the work that we've done together, Anya, has focused on early childhood literacy learning. And that's been a big theme, and that's been a connection to all of the diverse kinds of languages that Australia we experience. Children learning their own language, their mother language of English. We see the same issues, as well as the students that come to Australia to learn English as a second language. And we have, Indigenous cultures here, which have many different language dialects and things like that. So all of the challenges that we see in language learning, do come across different, what would say, different barriers, different lines, they cross over.
So Amy, play is a big area. It's like doing research on oxygen.
I feel like that, yes. Yes. I think it's actually a research program, research project on learning itself at a fundamental level, at some of the most basic evolutionary levels as well, as a species of human being. So I don't like to kind of box it and say, well, this is where it's relevant. I think the nature of my project is that we're crossing interdisciplinary lines. Absolutely.
So just to stick with you for another few minutes before we move on to another stage of our discussion today, do you have resources that are necessary for that, and any challenges at this very moment where you are, which is in Australia? You have to, for the first 6 or 1 year of your enrollment. So the way we do PhD in Australia, it's what I think it's done in Britain, or used to be done in Britain, which is you basically work on your own. The supervisor is your main point of contact, and you have 1 year, up to 1 year, to develop a proposal, like a formal proposal, not the initial one that allowed you to get into the course, but like the thing that will then need to be examined, approved, and you will be given the status of a PhD candidate. And then you will get all the money needed. Now you're poor. Nobody's going to pay you anything until you pass that initial examination of your proposal. So do you have resources? Do you have any challenges at this very moment in the beginning?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I would imagine that lots of people listening to this podcast might be teachers as well in some form or another. And I think that when you move from being a teacher to a researcher, that you actually go through some processes within yourself where you need to let go of kind of your need to hang on to methods that served you well as a teacher and kind of become more critical and develop independence. So, you know, you might have a supervisor and, like you said, you're very alone with that big project. You have to start to develop some skills to be able to do that work on your own. And I would say, in my experience, I went from a teacher with lots of questions to a master's student with more questions. And now I'm in my PhD. I have lots more questions than ever, but I'm still working out how to answer my questions or find the right ways to answer questions. And I rely, you know, I'm in the early phases of the PhD project, so I'm obviously leaning heavily on Anya for support in that area, but I can see that it's something that takes time to develop and grow and, you know, eventually become more independent in that particular skill. So I do feel like the resources are so important, but there's a big shift that happens, I think, specifically with teachers, I imagine, because I think you go from having, you know, teachers rely on things like teacher manuals and textbooks that tell us how to do things and what to think. And then you have to start to branch away from that and develop your own critical skills, your own thinking, to be able to question things and research. And it's actually like a bit of a tricky transformation. And I feel like I've had this conversation with Anya before, where I have to leave my teacher thinking behind and begin to grow my research thinking. It's actually kind of hurts. It's difficult.
It's a very important shift, because
Yeah.
it reflects also the habits that you've developed, that teachers, not you, but the teachers develop over time, and their reliance, or
Yes.
not their reliance, their expectation of having somebody tell them what to do
Yes.
in terms of method, in terms of actions, and so on. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles. I think you've very clearly identified it. I think that's
Yeah,
very
it's
good.
it's such a challenge to realize that there are, you know, more, like you have. I'm just going to pause there. I just agree with you, Andrew. I think that that's the hardest part, the shift, the mental shift. And I think that it's not, you know, you finish your PhD and you necessarily have lost that. You have to continually work on it all the time.
So people who are listening to us today and will be in the future, we will have thousands of people eventually within a month or two listening to our podcast. My question to you is, how do you embrace that? What's the process that you use to shift yourself? And how did you realize that you have to shift?
I don't know that I've figured it out completely yet. I mean, we still have to remember that I'm still early in the process, I think, of becoming an independent researcher myself. I feel like there's always been a really great relationship between Anya and I. That is, that I bring practical knowledge, you know, real experience of the classroom to our research endeavors, but I haven't had to take full weight and responsibility for the kind of theory, like the kind of thinking that goes on to put together a piece of research to complete a project from start to finish. And that is a challenge. I think right now, 6 months from my original acceptance date, I think roughly, I'm sort of in the thick of it. I'm constantly reading papers about completing a PhD for more clues about what I should be doing. And obviously, you know, recording my supervisors' notes and feedback and having lots of conversations all the time. But I still haven't worked out exactly what works for me. And I'm not sure that there is a process that everyone should follow. I think it's more of like an individual finding your way. I
want to actually shift today, the discussion today, away from that concept of individual. I have gone through an individual, like I was watching, for example, when Andrew was teaching his students and so on, so I was watching what he was doing, but I didn't, my supervisor was away, Andrew wasn't supervising me, I was on my way, and I'll tell you, it takes forever, so you're not on your own. And I really would like to, today, so I prepared a PowerPoint today, and you will see what we will do today. Small thing, but useful. I want us to shift away from that concept that I'm on my own. towards the 6 phone calls I get from you daily. It is extremely important, right? So I was in Poland, I was farewelling my mother who managed to pass away, and you didn't know, nobody knew. I mean, obviously that's not the thing I could go that could go through my throat, right? So nobody knew. And you were calling me, and that was good for me. But so it's about developing that relationship with a supervisor. It's extremely important. So we're talking about not just topic selection based on your experiences in school and something that policies are important. A lot of time when I get proposals, people forget about their local policies. Policies are important, but also your interaction with a supervisor and selection of a supervisor, right? Not to
Mm-hmm.
be put in the corner and be told it's your job.
I couldn't imagine working with someone who I hadn't, I feel like the work that we've done together has developed a sense of trust in each other, that we're able to kind of have better discussions and make quicker decisions and collaborate, because there's this sense of trust in each other's abilities and understanding, of course, that you're the more experienced person with more knowledgeable, and we don't go into like expert and novice and things like that, but I feel like there's a valuing too, because I think Anya respects that I might have new insights to bring to research in general, I think. And there's a mutual respect and definitely a safety, and I think that's really helpful when you're trying to leave behind old habits, as Andrew said, that you use to kind of survive teaching. You have to feel safe and in a good relationship with your supervisor so that you can try new things and explore different options and ask silly questions silly questions that you're embarrassed to say out loud, but you have to have someone you can ask them to, I think. Or some, chat GPT maybe first, and then and then
So Jordan Peterson says that thinking is about evaluating or entertaining ideas before you act them out, right? So supervision is that safe place where you can entertain ideas in the safety relationship that you have and trust relationship that you have with your supervisor. Lala, were you alone when you were working on your PhD? How did your journey look? Selection of the topic and so on and so on.
Well, I actually selected the topic probably within 2 years' time. I mostly taught writing and reading units in my university back then, and then I did a lot of reflections and observations on my own teaching practices, and I came to a point where I think the method, the pedagogical approach that I used in my class didn't work at all. So I felt that there should be a turning point for me as a researcher, as well as a teacher, and I think I've got that moment of turning point when I had my first email with you back in 2015.
Okay, but can I
Right?
interrupt here? Because
Sure.
obviously you work at university, because some people will not know you. So you work at
Right.
university and there you teach English as a foreign language and you
Yeah.
teach literacy, you teach reading and writing.
Right.
Um, the thing is that I had this good thought and it just ran away. So I'll just try to
Mm.
bring it back.
Yeah.
Sometimes the selection of a topic, it's very problematic because if
Mm.
that's all you know,
Yeah.
and you already are applying what you should know,
Right.
right? So you were in
Right.
a situation that you were a qualified expert in your area,
Mm.
however you felt uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the question was, were you going to what uh, the English say, beat the horse the dead horse, right? So doing the same thing over and over. So beating the dead horse. Andrew, tell us exactly what's the saying and how
All
did
right.
it work? You know, it will resurrect
Never mind.
the
This is an ESL. This is an
context.
ESL issue. Yes.
So,
You have to Google that one.
so that's the problem with the topic selection. That sometimes, as you are, say, have done your masters,
Yeah.
you are well recognized in your area by your colleagues. You do
Mhm.
the right thing. You
Yeah.
don't really know what to research. And
Right.
how are you going to reach out to some genius in some big university in the West
Mm.
and tell them, look, I am recognized in my area. People respect me. I've had several years of experience of teaching. However, I have no idea how to approach my problems. What do you think would happen to you if you just opened it up and sent an email to someone, say, from huge university?
Um, yeah, I think I had some emails. I mean, I sent some emails to a lot of professors in New Zealand and someone from Melbourne, Sydney, and other parts of the world. But they said that yes, I did not extrapolate the problem very clearly, and then I might have to put some new insights into the perspective, because in Indonesia we don't have a lot of not expertise but insights. Okay, so and at that moment I'm very aware that there is significant body of literature focusing mainly on three topics. I mean, number one is a new model of learning, and then the specific competencies and skills needed to function effectively in the 21st century, and then the pedagogy required to stimulate those capabilities. So I kept those three big themes in my head when I was writing my first draft of the proposal. But then there was a moment when I became fully aware that using a monolithic pedagogy may not be compatible with the requirement mentioned by UNESCO in their publication in 2015. Uh, the publication was entitled "Learning Futures." So, I think that particular moment, I say to myself that I had to go somewhere where I could embark on a completely different journey of topic selection, and then I can go deep diver into the unknown territory of research. So
So
that's
you were
that's
in a
how I see it.
so, so you were in a situation, and I think that I'm raising it because you're not the
Yeah,
only one,
yeah.
where you're clearly not an idiot,
Mhm.
right? You
Right.
are you already have a process. You are already in the process of self-reflection and knowledge accumulation, and
Yeah.
you have hit the wall. And
Mm.
when you reach out, so I get a lot of emails every week. I get
Right.
emails with students asking me to be their supervisor, and they send me those initial proposals. By the way,
Mm.
those initial proposals that you submit to university to get enrolled, they don't carry much weight. They're not
Yeah.
important. It's the
Mm.
late, it's the one that Amy is talking about that takes a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be sweating about it. But it's very interesting that when you approach someone from a big university, they already want you to identify the big thing that you will be researching, right? So
Right.
they
Right.
already want you to be where any took 6 months to land,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
under close supervision of mine, right? So
Right.
so this is that's why I'm trying to say that we're focusing a little bit on that relationship that you have with your mentor. Your
Yeah.
mentor is the person you will be with for 4 years.
Yeah.
That's the only teacher you will have. Your
Mm.
bachelor lasted
Yeah.
4 years, and you had many teachers. He's one teacher for 4 years. If that relationship is not working, it's a road uphill with gravel all over,
Yeah.
right? Or
Right.
basalt stones actually everywhere. So it's difficult.
Yeah.
So I think that this is interesting that, and I don't know what motivates professors at universities to discount those initial contacts with students who don't have everything fleshed out. And then it's interesting because when we have meetings, university meetings, and we have a statistics of students who completed or of supervisors who have the highest completion rates, lots of people are not there. Because if you think of yourself, you're so great and you only accept great students, you end up with 1, 2 PhD students for your career. And that's not your role as a researcher. That's your role maybe when you are lecturer A.
That's really interesting, Anya. I feel like I have something to say on that, because I do think that there is a bit of a general expectation sometimes that people who are completing a PhD or working on a PhD are somehow already endowed with the skills that they need to do it, and that they just need 4 years to do it. Like, it's just, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's
and something is missing. And maybe we can go to Andrew now. Andrew, I think something is missing from such PhDs, because if we rely on the expertise of a 30-year-old, like I'm twice your age, right? So on the expertise of a young boy, because on the career scale, you're on the very bottom, right? You don't even have a PhD, so you're really on the very bottom. If we rely on your expertise in formulating the topic and the research journey, that's not a very good strategy. It's not paying off for you, and not paying off for me, for Australia, for Indonesia, right? We have to, as supervisors, we have to be humble, and we have to understand that a bad initial letter to us, where student is sort of feeding their little, ways, but not quite on it, that's because they can't be.
They shouldn't expect to be.
Andrew, would you like to comment?
Well, first of all, let me say that my internet connection is not very good, so I don't know if I'm going to cut in and out. I think we need to ask one before we even begin to ask that question. I think we need to ask a different question, which is, why are people wanting to do a PhD? Most of the people that I see here in Thailand are people who want to get a better life, who want to get a PhD in order to get a better job, better pay, and so on. A lot of the people who do get a PhD from us go back home and they never do any more research.
Really?
Which is kind of interesting. Yeah, really. Yeah. So I have a lot of students, well, not just me. I mean, there are a lot of students who finish a PhD successfully and fulfill the requirements of the university here. And the requirements are about the same as any US university. So it's not a strange lower end values or anything like that. It's the same as an American university in general. They have to publish 1 article in Scopus or 2 articles depending on which country you're in, and then they go home and they're happy and their career opens up for them, and they never produce anything again. So sometimes I write to them and say, well, how about we do something? And they say, sure, that's a very good idea. I will think about it. And then they think about it and don't do anything. I think I should mention that, because actually it's something which is part of the process of PhD selection and topic selection and all of that. So it's not that they have, like Amy, a burning desire to discover something new. It's just that it's a way for them to get a better job. And I remember distinctly when I was quite young and I was looking for a career, I went to the professor of French at the University of Sydney and I said to him, oh, what should I do to get a career? He said, well, you should do a master's degree and then you should do a PhD in France, and then it'll be okay. And basically that's what I did, except I didn't do a master's. I went to the PhD straight away. Doesn't matter. the point was that I was worried about having a comfortable life rather than having a burning desire to discover something magnificently new and worthwhile.
Can I add something to that, Andrew? In
Yes.
Australia, since enrolling in PhD, I've been told by nearly every person that I know in Australia, in Darwin, that this is something that will cost me dearly, quality of life, that I will lose my husband and I'll be a terrible mother to my children while undertaking this PhD, and then I'll live a life of academia where all I do is research and I have no time for such things like a social life. So how interesting that there's two different kind of narratives that you
sure, but it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, look around you and see who is in the situation that you've just described, and you don't lead that kind of life at all, do you?
Well, I'm going to try to balance things as best I can.
Sure, but I think things like lifestyle. I mean, you're not going. Okay, the academic world is filled with obsessive people, and you need to be obsessive in a way in order to be able to do serious research. But you don't have to go down the drain because of that. Right? I mean, it is actually possible to do several things, and proceed with the balance and so on. I don't think there's a problem. I think people do it to themselves. Actually,
but the situation in say Southeast Asia, where say Lala lives, Cambodia, your Thai colleagues or students, is a bit different. So in Australia, say someone like me, when I was doing my PhD, obviously I have sacrificed a lot of money because I wasn't working. I was just studying, right? So there was a lot of sacrifice. And that's something that I think it's important to recognize, because a lot of people don't want to do PhD and want to be paid the same as I'm paid. And I'm thinking, like, you don't deserve it on many levels. On many levels. You've committed nothing to the field.
well,
And why should you? But in Australia, we can afford being enthusiastic and committed and maybe slightly obsessive. I think that in, say, Southeast Asian countries, and I'm not sure how it is in Indonesia, I think it's a little bit better, but in Cambodia, for example, you are paid for the hours of teaching, which is a murderous context. So people, in order to have a car, they have to teach like 60 hours a week.
Well, maybe not 60 hours, but anyway, the point is that the conditions are different and varies from place to place. And
however,
universities
there are opportunities to link up. I'm always open, and there are other people who are always open in Australia to collaborate. So I didn't include today the publication I had this year, but people who are on my Facebook, they can, or on the ResearchGate, they know that I've just published with my Indonesian colleagues from Pekanbaru. So there are, possibilities. I've collaborated with Vietnamese people, with Indonesian people, with Cambodian people. There are opportunities where you can reach out and use your Australian people, right? You provide data and they do everything else. You can do that, right? But if you don't want to do it, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things. Let's just go back to the PhD issue. So people come along and they want to have a better life, and in order to have a better life, they need better qualifications, and that's typically the path. Universities now in Asia are becoming more quality obsessed. We have a thing called AUNQUA, which is the ASEAN University. I can never remember, quality assurance, something or other, and. Sorry, the reason I laugh is because quality assurance has been pursuing me for the last 40 years, and with no noticeable improvements, I have to say. But But anyway, so every university, every new university I go to goes through a quality assurance thing, which is what's happening now. And Lala's going through UNQA as well, I believe. Uh, I think, I'm not quite sure, but anyway, doesn't matter. The point is that research is now taking on um, a more important role, and research is going to occupy a more important role in the future of universities, as they, especially as now they are engaged in what is it, scoring. You have, Lala, what's the name of
Ranking,
the
ranking.
Rankings, yeah.
The ranking?
ranking? The rankings, yes. So the number one ranking university in the world is what, UCL now, or is it MIT? I can't remember. MIT, I think.
Well, it's not Harvard anymore.
It's not Harvard anymore. Harvard is number three or something, or number two. It depends which system you're looking at. Here's the point. So once people come to you, you have a process of accepting them or rejecting them. And so the big universities expect you to be like them and know everything already and have read everybody, and have formulated something along the lines of what everybody else has formulated. In other words, it's a fairly orthodox system. Now, I'm not saying that people are not original. I think there are a lot of original uh, 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 um, projects which are undertaken. But at the same time, they want you to demonstrate that you've read this guy or that guy. And if you quote, Vygotsky a little bit, everybody will be happier. And if you quote James Lantoff a little bit, everybody will be happy. And if you quote Jack Richards, everybody will smile a lot,
Mm.
and so
And
on.
if you quote Andrew Lyon, what happens?
No, they don't quote Andrew Lyon because nobody knows me. I mean, I've written over 200. I've written over 200 papers in my career, which I don't think anyone has ever read, except for maybe you and Anya and Lala. Um, Things are actually changing a little bit, but not that much. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, so people come along and they say, and they come along with their predetermined knowledge and say, that's what I want to do. They
Mm.
don't actually say, I'm interested in this, but I'm open to new ideas.
Mm.
Right?
Right.
That's the second thing. The third thing is that they say, in terms of choosing topics, is that they're very pragmatic about it. So
Mm.
they say things like, to me, I'll say to them, well, why don't you do an experimental study and try to discover, how to improve learning? And say, oh, no, 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 that takes far too long. I'll just do a text analysis.
Mm.
And so they apply genre analysis or SFL analysis to a variety of texts. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm inventing something now, so please don't
And
take
how
this
do they know? How
as
do they know
reality.
that it is a useful analysis?
Well, somebody's told them that it's a useful
Yeah.
analysis, of course,
And that's the
because we have.
problem with orthodox thesis, right? And in Australia, for the last 40 years, nothing has changed when it comes to literacy.
Mm.
And it's a
Well,
problem
nothing has
because
changed.
I keep telling my students, my doctoral students, and today is Amy, before it was Lala. I keep telling them, because they come to me and they say, Anya, what will happen if I tell people out there all these unorthodox things? And I say to them, you're young, and it's expected from you that you will turn the world around,
Mm.
right? You will go upside down. It's expected from you, and it's the only time in your life that nobody will be upset with you when you tell them that everybody else is wrong and you are right. That's the only time in your life. Later on, it's politics. But
Mm.
when you are a student, when you are a doctoral student, you're still young, and people want to know something new from you. And the
See,
thing
that's the
is,
thing I was talking about when you're a teacher. There's not a lot of encouragement of you. The school invests in a massive literacy program, costs thousands of dollars to implement, and you're the one teacher going, this isn't good, this isn't data driven, this isn't, and that's a really hard thing to shift your mindset and truly take on that kind of persona that I'm here to challenge something and be a
Well,
bit
that's right.
unorthodox.
Well, that's right. No, we're not being a bit. I mean, I think, and that's the issue. That's one of the major issues. How do you change people's mentalities. How do you express your discomfort, your intellectual discomfort with what's going on? Because people say, well, if you want to keep your job as a teacher, you just do
Yes,
what I tell you. If you don't,
correct.
if you don't do that, then you'll lose your job, and you'll say, well, let me think about it for 10 seconds.
Okay, so
Oh, okay, I'll do what
Or
you
it
tell
feels
me.
pointless. It's just pointless because the principal says, well, that's great that you feel that way, but we're still doing this.
so this is something I
That's right.
wanted to actually focus on. So I will let
But
Andrew finish, but
can
I
I
just
can I
wanted
can
to,
I can I
yeah.
yeah, let me finish, because I want to say three things. The first thing is, the PhD time is a dream time. It's a time of dreaming.
Okay.
It's an opportunity to forget the constraints of normal life. Well, not maybe for Amy, because Amy is in this kind of double role as a both working and researching. But when you look at the research side of things, you're allowed to dream. And I always tell my students, forget about all the administrative stuff, because they'll say, well, the government doesn't let us do this. And my answer is, well, I don't care what the government says.
Mm.
We're not trying to help the government. We're trying to help science.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
Right.
Second thing is the connection with the supervisor. Now, in a way, every supervisor can supervise anything.
Mm.
Um, No, that doesn't. It's not exactly true, but from a formal perspective of a university supervisory structure, anybody can look at you and say, "Well, have you got an introduction, a literature review, a chapter 3, a chapter 4, a chapter 5, and a chapter 6?" And they'll say, "Oh, and did you do the statistics right? And did you do the?" But they don't check on the intellectual work. A lot of the time, the intellectual work gets swallowed up by the worry about technique. So that's the second thing. So nobody will say, "Oh well, let's chuck out systemic functional linguistics and we'll replace it with this other crazy stuff that Lala does." Sorry, Lala. It's not crazy. It's not
I love
crazy. It's actually very data driven.
It is. It is.
And not just that you do, but that I do and Anya does, and maybe Amy will do in a different kind of way. But what we're saying with the SFL stuff is, forget linguistics as the
Mm.
driving force behind learning, because it isn't, and
Mm.
replace it, say, in my case at least, with the interface between perception and learning, which
Mm.
is more like the sort of stuff Amy's doing at the moment, or thinking about doing. So that's the second thing. So you the choice of a supervisor actually is beyond the choice of a discipline.
Mm.
It is a hugely personal relationship. I'd go further. In the best models, it is entirely personal.
Mm.
And people say, "Oh, you can't say that because you've got to keep your distance."
Yeah, that's
Well, you do, but you don't. But that's not what I'm talking about. I think what I'm talking about is not personal distance, but still, it's a very personal relationship, because your minds are kind of blending together. It's a kind of Vulcan mind meld that goes
Mm.
on. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Vulcan mind meld, there's a series called Star Trek that is quite old, that you should all go and watch, where
yes, I'm familiar
people
with
can
it.
read
I'm
each
not too
other's
young
minds.
for that.
But
Yeah.
but it's as close to a mind meld as you're going to get, as a
Well,
fusion of minds. So fusion, and secondly, it's not 4 years of a relationship. It's actually a lifetime relationship.
If we're
Right.
done,
Once once the once the doctoral connection is made and the supervisory relationship is made, it goes forever.
Right.
And also, depending on cultures, it's even worse than that, because people feel that they have to come back and not come back, but they have to promote you, me, like a supervisor, and so on, which is very nice, but not necessarily necessary.
Mm.
So that's the second thing. And the third thing I was going to say is, if you're going to do a topic, choose something worth doing, right? I mean,
Mm.
choose a really important topic, not, oh, is a gamification of learn is gamification in the development of a program to learn the use of prepositions In English, going to help. So will gamification help? Ah, well, guess what? Oh, yeah, it does, because when you compare it with something which is really boring, people remember the gamification stuff a bit better. So we have a million PhDs which are constructed around topics like that. Now, so the third thing is make so. What did I say? I can't remember the first thing. Dream,
So the
Dream.
relationship is important.
lifelong relationship, and
Yeah.
find a really worthwhile topic to do, which is theoretically complicated, complex, and tough, and which also has interesting outcomes. The price you
Mm.
will pay for doing the third one is that you may contradict a lot of people who are in power and who
Right.
will want to negate what you have discovered or your way of thinking and criticize you for that.
Mm.
I wanted to
But
now build on that. Yeah.
if you do, I'll just finish the but. But if you do this these strange things and they do work out, it's very hard for people to deny them.
Mm.
Yeah.
In other words, they can say, well, we didn't like your PhD thesis and we didn't like your article about this or that because we just don't like it. I mean, because we just don't really believe it. You didn't take account of this and that and the other. And all I say is, hey, Lala's study was done with double blind raters. It doesn't matter how you scream about it. It was done
Yeah.
blind, and these are the outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
So I
Is
wanted
there
to
what?
talk about, yeah. You, Andrew.
Yes, finished.
Okay. So I wanted to just before I take this to talk further, I wanted to just bit of an anecdote. Today we are doing anecdotes. So there is this guy, I think his name was Richard Feynman. So he was a multiple laureate, winning Nobel Prizes in physics. His
Mm.
supervisor was John Wheeler, another genius. Now, talking about, so we're talking about two extreme types of supervision. We're talking extremes because anything in the middle is the middle, right? So talking extremes for differentiation. So sometimes you have that supervision which is like hands off, and then the other one is hands on. Now, noticed that John Wheeler was supervising future Nobel Prize laureate. They were working on the problem of the PhD together. That's how hard it was, and that's how important the problem was. So the choice of the problem was um, important, and they chose one that was worth following through. Right, it was worth investigating. It was worth the time of both scholars, and the relationship was so close that they were both investigating. And I'd give you
Mm.
this anecdote. This is so funny.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Richard Feynman had a problem. Everything in the universe ages except for
Mm.
electrons. The electron from
Mm.
13 billion years ago looks exactly the same like the electron today. So they have a
Okay.
problem. Why doesn't the electron change? At 2 o'clock in the morning, the student then, Richard Feynman, I think Richard Feynman, I don't know, gets a phone
Yes, it
call
was Richard
from
Feynman.
John Wheeler. I know. So the supervisor calls the student at 2 o'clock in the morning with the most preposterous theory, which is there's only one electron in the entire universe. Anyway, and that theory is still kind of not, I mean, people obviously have tried to abolish it, but it is still sort of ongoing. So that's interesting. Now, once you have a subject or a problem which is worth investigating, you will learn to defend it, as Andrew said, sometimes with statistics, but also with concepts, which is what Lala is going through quite powerfully and quite nicely. Now, I wanted to ask to move a little bit to an article that I just read today. And I want to talk about abstract reasoning skills. I want to talk about it because in Australia, as far as I can see, and as my tentacles reached, right, through literature and through data of my students, research students, Australians, pre-service and in-service teachers are not able to talk about their practice.
Mm.
They do not have an abstract vision in which they could actually frame a narrative about what they do and why. It's literally like a disease. So obviously, with my colleagues from Indonesia, we found the same with pre-service students in Indonesia, wherever the project was happening. But it's also in Australia. It's endemic. And I
Mm.
want us to have a look how a paper written by Ruth Alberton, published in extremely prestigious journal in Australia, Higher Education Research and Development, how she looks at it. And what can we gain from it? Because PhD is about, true Amy, it's about developing those abstract reasoning skills. Today I had a discussion with another student of mine on the phone, and I said to her, do not think of things like words. Name thoughts. This is group A, this is group B. Right? Anyway, so it's abstract, right? Because you find commonalities. So let's have a look at some things. What struck me in that paper is that it was totally non-committal in relation to everything. I haven't gained anything from it other than maybe some of those concepts that I myself could play with them, but I could play with almost all concepts. So I could play with those concepts. But Ruth, what she was doing here, she kind of produced these things in a specific order. Now, Ruth is not
Mm.
committing herself to this order. But if you do not commit yourself to any order in your framework, you organize categories alphabetically. But she hasn't done it. K is before D, clearly. Right? So I'm just not sure that from knowing we can go to doing. She would say, oh, no, it's intermeshed, it is whatever, whatever. Like if it is intermeshed and everything, whatever, 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 so what are we learning? I found that her definitions also were not very clear. So you apply, what did she say about doing? So knowing is about knowing the subject area. Doing is skills, as reflects skills to apply the theoretical and research knowledge. Theoretical knowledge, so what is, and research knowledge, which is how, in the project. I would never put it application. You don't apply knowledge and then you think about it. And then you have an open mind because you allow other people to critique it or you find limitations. I'm just finding myself really at difficulty with that. Please interrupt me, Andrew and Lala and Amy here, whenever. I've got about 6 slides, so we will go through them very quickly. Or maybe I'll go through the slides and you can then comment. Either way. So thinking, in my view, yes. So very often you have to have a justification why you say in the questionnaire or how you set up the experiment, how you set up your questionnaire. It cannot be just, I'll just ask general questions. One way or another, there has to be a hypothesis in your study, because otherwise, why ask these questions, right? And maybe you can
All
have
right,
some.
I will interrupt you briefly.
Yeah.
This reminds me hugely of Bloom's taxonomy.
Yeah. But I don't have a
If you
problem
look
with
at,
Bloom. I just have a problem
but you
with
should
his.
have a problem with,
Yeah.
no, but you should have a problem with Bloom.
Depends how you work with it.
Because he goes, Bloom's taxonomy is you start off with knowledge, then comprehension, then application, then analysis, then synthesis, and then evaluation, which is, this progression towards thinking.
right? So she wants to. She's talking about
Now,
this
I'm
transformative
not saying
aspect.
I'm not saying it's exactly Bloom, but it's very, very similar to
Yeah.
Bloom's taxonomy.
So there's this transformative. She thinks. So what she's talking about is how the PhD should have a transformative impact on the student, and then also some impact also on different levels of research development in the institution and in the country, right? So it should have an impact. So I do have a problem with that doing straight away after knowing. It takes a lot to set up a project, a methodology of a project. It takes a lot of knowing. It takes a lot of playing with things. So so I'm just running through this. I don't remember everything. So I'm just running it, thinking, using high level cognitive strategies based on deep level information processing, thinking about on thinking. Like when I'm a student and someone says to me, you know what critical thinking is? You just apply higher level cognitive strategies based on deep level information processing. It is about thinking about thinking. If I was supervising Amy like this or any of my students, from confused, they will go into a heart attack. This is the lack of precision, not offering any processes. Very often, scholars do not offer specific processes for students to go through because they don't know them. They haven't done the work. They either follow the past or they work intuitively. Either way, if you develop if you create a publication about supporting students in developing higher order thinking skills, you should do some research on how to break them down in order to actually name those processes that are involved and maybe even provide some sort of systems. It has to be helpful. She talks about pedagogy of PhD supervision in this article. I haven't found anything. This is all intuition and extremely milky, milky in the sense like foggy. Um, Willing mindset, again, openness, needed for excellence and quality engagement. And it is integral to all doctoral. You could have written it yourself before you write the PhD. And then she's come up with these strategies. You have this, based on her study with students, these are the different strategies that students use, doctoral students in South Africa, to deal with developing those higher order thinking skills. So taking a break, sleeping it off, like summarizing and a draft. And the summarizing and draft upon draft process helps filtering. How do you filter things?
Mm.
Interestingly, I have processes, obviously, but I developed them for two reasons. One of them because the Australian curriculum requires them, and secondly because of my research in literacy, right? So they sort of merged. So there's students mentioned like this text on the bottom, embracing external critique, well, being open, well, embracing it, self-criticism through reasoning and arguing with yourself. Very generic, very ambiguous. So all I'm saying is we have all these beautiful outcomes, we have all these beautiful words.
Mm.
We even have a beautiful publication which says we need to have some pedagogy of it, but it's not pedagogy. You have to get actually your own hands dirty to question your
Mm.
own thinking about what's involved in those abstract reasoning skills, so that you can actually then use them with your students and maybe then name them with students. This is what we're doing, or this is what you could do. So here's some more data from the study. I'm always willing to learn. I'm open to critique. The ability to come back and try to see what is the point. I'm not sure anybody can learn much from it other than what we already know and Amy has said, like you have to change your expectations. You have to open up. But how? How?
Mm.
I think we had a discussion with Amy just the other day, right? Where Amy
Mhm.
confused
Mhm.
her analysis of and on the one hand, she's read the literature and she summarized it, but that's the literature, and now her analysis is something else, right? So that's what literature says, and how you think about literature are two different things. So you have to make it very clear at each point, where is the literature talking and where is you talking, right? It's a very important skill. So you have to, as a supervisor, be very aware of all kinds of things that, of what it means, abstract reasoning. And if you go on internet and you type abstract reasoning skills and so on, that will take you actually further. And then maybe in due course you will improve in those, in the terminology and processes involved.
I did, when I was reading that paper, Anya, one thing that stood out to me was just the idea that in my personal experience, the most effective way to shift my perspective from the teacher who, has certain habits and ways of thinking to the researcher is getting it wrong. And I didn't feel like the paper talked about that at all. This idea that you try things, there, you get feedback from your supervisor saying, this isn't doing it, this isn't meeting, this isn't the kind of thinking, this isn't quite right, so to speak. Just to simplify, I guess, for the listeners. And then me taking that away and thinking and thinking and thinking and sort of having those realizations that I'm relying on old ways of thinking so that I can then be more aware of them, I guess. So for me, getting it wrong helps a lot. Having conversations where I talk to you about my
I don't think, I think she did say, which is openness to critique, but I think you are saying something completely different, which is I'm relying on old ways of thinking. And that's what she didn't say.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because at the end of the day, we have these paradigms of orthodoxy. So the only thing you have to do is to step in.
Yep.
And what you get from me is something else. Before I show you my last slide, I would like us to maybe I'll show you my last slide. So on the bottom, we have some of those, you see the activities on the bottom? So it's teaching abstract thinking, so synthesizing, analyzing, questioning, comparing, contrasting, gathering, identifying relevant groups, identifying relevant contrasts, identifying relevant contrasting groups. I'm not having everything there, obviously, right? But identifying relevant contrasting groups, maybe irrelevant first and then relevant in relation to the problem. Gathering information, problem solving, recognizing relationships, cause effect relationships, right? So all these sort of strategies enable students to examine information from different perspectives and in different ways by looking at different relationships. So that's some of them. And I think things like identifying contrast, identifying relevant contrast, identifying groups, and then identifying relevant contrasting groups. It's really important because then we know that this belongs to group A and this belongs to group B. Whereas what I say, sometimes I'm asked to review a draft of a PhD. I don't know why I was asked these things, but sometimes someone sends me a PhD and the literature review is just a rant. In 2017, this person said this. In 2018, another person said this. In 2023, this person said this. In 2012, this person said this. There are no groups. And yet you should have sections, you should have headings, and these headings should be meaningful in relation to the problem of the study, not in relation to the history of the field. History of the field is relevant, everybody knows it. So we're into tips, actionable tips. So Amy, you're first, then Lala, then Andrew. So actionable tips. So what would you suggest?
Oh, I don't know that I have any, Anya. I feel I don't have enough experience yet to offer anything helpful.
So nothing worked for you?
I feel like I'm in the middle of finding out what works for me, actually. I'm right in the thick of it.
You look very happy before, and now at this very moment you say, well, maybe my supervisor is not that good, maybe
No, my supervisor is fantastic and extremely patient. I would say that it hurts to change your thinking this way, that it's a slightly painful process. And sometimes I need to take time out to enjoy. So, like, instead of just reading and getting frustrated and things like that, I will sometimes just enjoy, and I'm grateful to you, Anya, for this specifically, but just sharing something completely left field, like a lecture on a neuroscientist just talking about dreams and or something like that. And I just find that really refreshing. And just back to what Andrew said about why you might do a PhD. For me, I'm doing a PhD because I want to do research for the rest of my life. So I try to remind myself about why I enjoy it so much by just plugging myself into things that have nothing to do with my project, but bring me that sense of excitement and interest again.
Lala, any tips, Lala?
Well, I think it is very important for everyone who is going to do PhD to consider the best supervisor for them, because you're right, Anya. Having a solid mentorship with the supervisors are very essential in the development of the thesis, and also in the development of our intellectuality. And I'm very happy to say to both of you here that you guys, Andrew and Anya, are a kind of teachers who show me how to look, not what to look at. So, there are a lot of teachers who can show me, Lala, this is what you have to look at, blah blah. But Andrew and Anya are a very special teachers who could show me how to look. That's number one. And number two, in relation to the development of myself as a researcher, I think Anya and Andrew has helped me a lot, not only in developing the abstract reasoning, but also in the process of active testing of abstraction. So I always highlighted that part of research processes where, well, abstraction plus active testing abstraction will help me grow further as a new person. I mean, in Australia and also here in Indonesia. So yeah, pick the right persons, not just the university. I mean, you could go to any university where you like, but thinking of the best supervisors are very essential in how we are developing as a person, as well as a researcher.
Yeah,
What
on
did
that
you?
from Lala, I would recommend that anyone interested in connecting with the supervisor try to spend some time finding out research interests and connecting with them,
Right.
perhaps in a different way rather than just submitting a
Yeah.
proposal cold, but try to
Right.
reach out to them and maybe like try to work with them for a few
Right.
months beforehand on sort of like
Right.
Anya and Andrew are always completing working on different projects and like acting as a research assistant to a
Hmm.
supervisor. You might get to know them in a way that really helps you decide if this is the person
Yeah.
you want, like you said,
Yeah.
spend the rest of your life with. I think it sounds like a marriage at this point. Some homework.
Well, I didn't want to say it, but it is. Uh, but I think the other thing is to see how. Well, first of all, let me say one thing. That to say, few people would say, "I want to be a researcher for the rest of my life." I I
Really?
I don't think many people say. I really don't think many people say that. I
Oh,
think
okay.
maybe 10%, and mean it. I mean, I think uh, I, I think a lot of people say, yeah, I'm interested in research. It's very nice. Oh well, yeah, well, let's go fishing as
It's not
well.
that nice.
And and and, and you do go, and you do well, or whatever. And but the other thing I wanted to say is that I think that the kinds of without sounding like a mutual admiration society, I think that the kinds of thinking that get developed through PhD programs, or what I see as successful PhD programs, are also reflected in the success that the people who've been through the programs enjoy. There are a lot of people with PhDs who don't get very far,
Hmm.
and then there are some, on the other hand, as I said, not like a mutual admiration society, but I will mention people like both Amy and Lala. And I've just come back from a week in Indonesia at Lala's university, where I think the sort of intellectual work that people do actually do get recognized somehow at some level by the organizations. So it's not that you just have a monolithic organization and you have people who are subversive inside it and kind of change it a little bit. Sometimes the organization also recognizes the value of the people, and uh, in this case, CDU recognized Amy and by employing her as a lecturer, and Lala is now the director of international studies in his university and a key member of the cyber development. His university is moving from a traditional university to a cyber university, and that is making a lot of. Hello, can anybody hear me? Are you still
Yeah,
there?
Yeah.
yeah. We are still here.
Are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you froze on my screen. What I was
Oh
going to
my.
say, Lala's
We want to hear
university is going from a
more.
traditional university to a cyber university, and that has huge implications.
Right.
It's not simply, oh, well, we will computerize everything. Everything will
Mm,
now be e-learning.
mm,
Um, it's a huge undertaking, and that's what Andrew Martin and I were looking at
yeah.
for a whole week, and we still didn't solve it.
Mm,
So Andrew, did you summarize your did I miss it?
Hello.
So
yeah.
what was your summary, Andrew? So what are the actionable tips? Finding the supervisor,
My
developing
summary is
maybe.
that actually,
Chris Andrew is frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen. Yeah.
I'm lo- I'm losing you guys all the time.
Okay, but you could talk. Don't worry about it, Andrew. Just keep talking.
But all right, well, all right, well, I do. So part of the problem with what Amy and Lala were saying.
Okay, so I think Andrew has froze. Okay, so can I just ask?
Part of the
Can we read?
problem with what Amy and Lala were saying. I'll try and I hope we can stay online for just half a minute. One of the
Okay.
problems is how do you connect with supervisors? You can't actually do what Amy, because most
Okay, Amy. So
it's not
there's a
working.
question.
All
There's
right,
okay, Andrew. Just wait.
most okay, okay.
Okay, so what? Try
Right,
Andrew
finish.
again. Try the last time. Try. Try. Maybe it will work. No.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll try
Amy.
without the picture. Maybe that will help.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to say is it's impossible to do what Amy suggested, which is to work with your prospective supervisor. Most of the time, you don't know the supervisors. They live in another university or another country or another place, and you just work it on the basis of reputation or something like that.
Mm.
And so and then you start writing messages like, "Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that," and then somebody writes back to you and says, "Have you read, I don't know, this person or that person? Have you read my work?"
Mm,
Or whatever it is. So it's pretty difficult to do that. It's better to
Mm.
try and find something that you can agree with theoretically, or you can think of as a stepping stone to building something new. I mean, you might want to work with Ramachandran, for example, and that could probably work even if you haven't met him. Um, and people write to Anya and say, "I want to work on your reading for emotions
mm,
Mm.
model."
Mm.
and they are able to do that and have confidence that they will be able to do something reasonable with her. And then when they get here, they can cement that relationship. And if for some reason it doesn't work, they can go somewhere else or with somebody else,
Mm.
which doesn't happen very often, but does happen sometimes.
Thank you, Andrew.
So
So
so loyalty, so you get loyalty and you get respect and you get interaction and you get the this strange kind of marriage forever from a few emails.
right, and I think in regard to Mehrosh's questions, Mehrosh Azem asked us a question. Azim, I think that what I would do, and it's hard maybe for beginning students, but see whether the attitude in the emails that the prospective supervisor is actually projecting. Is it nice? Is it helpful? Um, and the other thing is there anything in the responses that you get that you find kind of mind blowing or a little bit different? I think when Lala wrote to me an email first and sent me his project, which was very much within the mainstream agenda, and I asked him, where is the student here? Where's the learner in your project? And he instantly applied to my university and had to convince his scholarship people back in Indonesia to fund him to specifically work with me, because he liked the way we interacted and he liked the questions I asked him. Right. So if those questions are sort of revealing to you or
Yeah.
interesting. By the way, I don't know about Asia. In Australia, when you get a scholarship with, say, Anya Lyon, me,
Mm.
and you don't like me after 2 months, the scholarship doesn't tie you up to a university. You can take that scholarship anywhere in Australia.
Mm.
A lot of people don't know it and they think, oh, I got a scholarship, I have to stay with this woman and I don't like her. Yes, you
Mm.
can go anywhere. So it's transferable. That scholarship is practically, if you get a scholarship in Australia, even though you get it from a particular university, it is actually from the government.
Mm.
And you can take it anywhere to any different university, provided you find another supervisor. So there are ways, once you choose your supervisor, you're not necessarily stuck with that person if you don't like them.
That's a very good point that Andrew makes, though, I think, about like reading their work and, watching any online lectures and things that they have. It's so important that you feel some sense of connection with their kind of way of working and thinking. They should be appealing to you, right? Like that should be the first step.
All right, friends,
But
we will
let
finish
me
for
just
today.
make I don't normally do a plug for American style PhD programs because I think the British and Australian model is better. But with the American style PhD program, there is a coursework component, and then that's followed by a thesis. This is what we have here in Thailand, and then we bring people in. They do the coursework, and what happens is they get to meet the prospective supervisors, and they have a year or 9 months or something like that to listen to these people lecturing them or doing seminars or workshops or whatever, and then they can make a better choice.
Yeah,
So,
wow.
they may come in and say, I want to do this, because they come in, they say, yeah, I want to do this. And then they go to some lectures and they say, oh, okay, I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something different. And I want to do it with this person because I get on with them well and because I like the way they think.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to finish it, but it made me think of something. So that's true. However, we have this coursework masters as well, and then PhD. So altogether, it's about 5 years. Um, but what I wanted to say on this one, what I was doing when I was coordinating masters, coursework masters, I knew that in my college, and it's everywhere, in every university, even though you fall in love with one lecturer and you follow up, sometimes the level of supervision is not necessarily equal. So what I was doing, I was running every say once a week. I was running seminars where students where scholars were talking about their work, but also students. I call them troubleshooting seminars, where students were sharing where they are and what their struggles were. So as a coordinator, I was leveling the level of supervision to make sure that even if you work with a colleague A or colleague B who may have less sort of experience, I was making sure that you actually complete on time and do it well, right? Because you got support additional to what your lecturers in your masters or the coursework were actually offering. And I think it's important because some people who are listening to us today or some people who will be listening are in that role. And I know it's extracurricular work, but the idea is to actually build that research culture in your institution. And that's one way to actually contribute to it.
So true. Yeah, that was fantastic. I remember those.
All right, friends, see you next in 2 weeks.
All right. See you in 2 weeks, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Dewi. Thank you so much for nice words. How do you maintain mental health when you're doing research? Um, I do other things. Obviously, I play on social media. I exercise. I like pancakes, and I like working. I like working. Like it's very hard to get to the computer and work, but once I'm sitting in front of it, it's like a drug. It draws me in. I find this article. I find this article. I find this article, and then I pull out things from it and I put them somewhere so that I can find them. Thank you, Azim. Thank you so much, Mehrosh. Thank you, guys.
Bye.